Kapoor for this invitation. I have to talk. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I thank Dr. Kapoor and the department for this kind invitation. And so I think you are already like attending this workshop for last 1 week, right? And you have heard a lot about like human rights, maybe from a different angle because like Professor, she is from like gender studies, right? So today we can like kind of compare this with this like journalism aspect only. So that's the thing. So why we have to study this human rights approach of like journalism or like human rights journalism? Like why it's like important? We know that like we have already like learned a lot about the role of journalists in the society, right? So the journalists have this social responsibility, and they are the one surviving the society, and then like finding out like what's wrong or like what is right in the society, and then they are like taking that one to the larger people, right? So here, like the journalists not only hold the power to inform the public, right, and they are also like kind of promoting public knowledge and understanding of issues. But the major role of a journalist is to educate the public, right? So they have to like talk about the important issues, like what is like bothering in the society. So that is their like major role. So they have to like increase the awareness of the members, right? So when we talk about like human rights based approach, it should like ensure that the projects and the programs that are based on like international human rights standards, so they have to like empower those who are like involved, and they should like care about who are all mostly like marginalized, right? So the role of the journalist is not only to report about like big corporates and their like family weddings and other things, right? So there are like a lot of things they are doing it for the commercial aspect, and we cannot just blame the journalists because it's not only in their hands like what to report and what not to report. There is a kind of gatekeeping, right? You all know about that one, right? So I think you are all PhD scholars, right? These are scholars and those are masters. Okay, two of your master students. Because I don't have like much idea about who will be the participant, right? So that's what. So let me like kind of try to bring in like for the research scholars also and for the students also like how to bring those issues. Okay. So here this approach like examine all aspects of like human rights issue. So when we talk about the political rights, the civil rights, the cultural rights, like all those human rights, like the journalist has to like examine each and everything, and they also have to examine the local, state, and the national factors and the government policies and also the legal environment, right? So the role of the journalist is like much higher because they have the power to communicate, right? And they have the space also to like communicate, right? So they have to like look for these human rights issues in the society, and they have to like report it to the larger public. So what makes human rights news, right? So we all have like studied about the news values, right? So when we talk about the news values, whatever we are having is the westernized notion of like news values. That is this prominence and this timeliness, then relevance and proximity, right? So when we talk about like proximity, also there are like certain human rights issues. For example, if something happened in Manipur, it may not be a big deal for the people in like Mumbai or in Delhi or somewhere else, right? So even this westernized notion of like news values also, even though they say that this human rights news can like perfectly fit within these four news values, that is the prominence, timeline, timeliness, and relevance and proximity. But there are times, the human rights issues like never be considered to be a news also because they think that proximity, so it's not happening in our state or it's not happening in our region, so we cannot like concentrate on that one, right? So that is also like one problem with us. Like so when we talk about this like human rights issues, like we are like going to talk about the people's daily lived experiences, like how they eat, how they live, like how their opportunities for education, their opportunities for like this religious what you call like rights, right? All those things. So here we are about like people's entitlement, right? So as a citizen of India, they are like entitled to right to life, liberty, right? Freedom to religion or freedom of speech and expression, or they are like supposed to get like at least like food and like shelter, and then like good like safe drinking water and all those things. This all like comes under this human interest stories only. But the problem is that like in India, when we talk about like human rights news, we are thinking that it's such a big thing. If and only there is some violation is there, then we have to report it. But it doesn't mean that you have to wait till certain people are like violating certain rights, then only you have to report. But there are like certain issues, like so many issues are there. So, for example, if 2 days back also there is a news that in India the price for this vegetables is on this one. So many people cannot like afford for vegetables because it has like even it is like more or expensive than the meat, right? So it's a report it says. So you can like relate that report to the local communities, and then you can report on that also, right? So here there is no violation, right? So someone is not like kind of beating someone or like discriminating someone, but like someone is not able to like afford proper food, right? And then it's also like affects their health and like nutrition and other things, right? So we have to like kind of think come out of that box, that we shouldn't like wait only for the violations. We have to like before it's get violated, we have to report it. So it's a kind of like preventive journalism only, right? We are not like reactive journalism. We are not going to react if after certain things happen and then we are like going to report it. No, we are like going to report even like before certain things happen, and there are like certain conditions it might lead to like violations, so the government should come in, right? And ours is a democracy, right? And the elected governments have the duty to safeguard their citizens, right? So the media has also the right, because they are also considered as the fourth estate, and they are also like one of the stakeholders of democracy, right? So they also have the right to, and also it's their duty to report like whatever it's like they have to like prevent certain violations in their society. So that's what like like human rights can become news also. So it has to be guided by the news values and the principles of journalism, right? So what are the like principles that guide like journalists? For example, would people be interested to know about that issue being reported, and who are the people concerned, and who are the people who would be most affected by the story? How would they be affected? Who else would be affected? So is the issue a matter of like public interest? So how will it affect people's lives? How close is it to the audience? So what is the journalist's own relationship with the issue? What are the experiences elsewhere, right? So when we talk about that vegetable price hike, no, so you can like relate to that one. So how people will be like affected and all, right? So in Tamil Nadu, I think like once I think there was this tomato race price was like very high, and then it was like be reported in the media again and again, and later on the government also started like distributing those vegetables using the public distribution system, okay, the nation shops and all, right? So if and only like journalists bring that issue to the notice, and we also don't know how the vegetable sellers are being affected, right? And most of these vegetable sellers are like indigenous women, like tribal women who are like sitting in the markets and selling, right? So it's not just like vegetable price hike, but it's also affecting different peoples in a different way. So it's the role of the journalist to bring that news angle, right? So whether the new journalist can bring that angle of indigenous women being affected, right? And they're like daily selling, so they can like compare if it is like very high, like how much they are able to sell and how much they are like taking it back. Like most of this, I think in Aizawl also we have this Saturday markets. So Friday night itself, you can see this women from different villages. They are coming and like setting up their stalls and everything, and the whole day they'll be sitting. And sometimes in the Saturday evening by 6 7, they won't be selling enough because it's very high. Then after that, they'll start giving half price and all. And you can see that people goes by the time to take those vegetables in the half price and all, right? So there are like so we can like see from like what angle. And again, vegetable is not a very simple thing also. It's also like affecting the nutritional, for each and every human being we need like certain nutrition like vitamins and everything, right? So even like one of this cancer research says that if women are not taking like the intake of their vegetables and fruits is like very less, then it's also like affecting the chance of getting the cancer, right? So all these like dietary practices and the nutritional practices also like affects in a long term, right? So that's what, like, even though it's a very small issue, right, for us, like we may think that what, there is no such novelty, right? But people can like bring in those things. Like I think like the last week also you can see in most of the newspapers they have made as a very nice big articles like in many of the, but in the local news and all they won't be like doing it. Mostly in the national dailies they are, and that is only the people who can afford to read that one they'll be reading, but the common people they may not know like whether why this much of price. Even today there is this there is a price hike on this oil. So from 120 it has suddenly like raised to like 190 rupees, right? So it will be like affecting like so many other, like, so likewise only like you have to pick the news. It has the human interest, right? So you all have studied like human interest as one of the news value, but in that we'll be like always talking about if someone has done extraordinary, right, some Guinness record, or someone has like done a philanthropic work, or someone has like planted 1000 trees, then only they become like news, right? But we should come out of that common assumption of like the human interest stories, like human, each and everything has a human interest value, right? Because it's all like affecting the human beings life. So that's what like that, the things which are like affecting the human beings lives and they're like their rights, then we have to cover that one. Then how to identify those things also, right? So these human rights stories are like everywhere, right? But it's always like kind of unnoticed, or like it's not identified by the journalist, right? So like identifying human rights stories also requires journalists to be sensitive and discerning about issues of inequality, unfair practices and unbalances in society. So that's the thing. So how to identify those human rights stories? The one thing is that the newspaper, radios, television, and online. So they are like seeing a lot of things, right? So when someone like kind of like it's reported as a small report in a newspaper or in the radio or a television or in like online also, there can be some debate or some hashtag like they started and it's being like trending in trending, then it can also be like news or like ideas from experiences, right? So mostly this journalists are also part of that particular community or that particular society, right? They might be so the journalist may be from Guwahati or from Tezpur, right? Or in Mizoram, may from Aizawl. So they might know. So from their experiences also they can report and ideas from observation. So we all usually say that the journalists have the nose for news. So they have to find out like what is news and they have to like report it, right? And I will give you one thing like from experiences also. Like one of our scholar actually, she is a journalist with East Mojan. Okay, Kimi Colby, and she used to write very beautiful stories. And there was like one story about this potholes in the roads. Okay, so it's a normal issue and we all know that in India we have to search roads in many places, right? And it's all like only the potholes be that will be like small patches of like road, right? So it's the same like in Mizoram also. And what happened there, one of her friend like fell down and then she injured her like like knee, and then she has to like undergo like rest for like 1 month and all. Then it has like okay, like let me like write it as a news. And then before that also 1 or 2% like has lost their lives in that one. So when we talk about this what you call magnitude, so in Indian newspapers they say that if and only 20 people are dying or 30 people are dying, then it's a huge, it will consider as a news. But here, even though like 1 or 2% have died and others have got injured, but she chose that okay, let it be a news, right? And then she wrote in the show what did this. She started with that the person who got killed in that protocol, right? So she started with like how her brother like she told the story behind that person like through his mother and brother and his family, right? And later on she also like took bites from the other people, right? So it's a very small news, like it doesn't have that much magnitude or novelty, right? And not like prominence, nothing was there, but still it has like become a news because it has that human rights angle or like human interest angle. Okay, So that one. So it can also be like from your observation also you can do. And ideas from interaction with others. So journalists are also like kind of interact with so many people. Like they will be like kind of interacting with this fellow journalists and like NGOs and then this government officials and then common people, like so many things they will be discussing. So even from the interaction with others also they can like come out as a news, right? And conference workshops and seminar, like mostly this conference workshop seminar, even the conference is like in Mizoram actually, I think in this their local this Frontier Dispatch, it's a bilingual weekly magazine. In that they have like reported about like one research article from Mizoram University. It is about school education and how the children are affected by this, irregularity of the appointment of like teachers and all, right? So it has they have like taken that report and then they have like made it as a news. So sometimes like even this conference workshops and seminar also, like sometimes these NGOs organize, right? So some UNICEF organize and then this what you call like this state AIDS control society, they organize a conference.
Hey, our seamstress students are also joining us.
Yeah, no problem. So this AIDS control society, they are like organizing some, workshop and all. So these journalists they all usually like go and attend. So from that also they can get like lots of ideas and then they can make it as a news.
Last one about that, लागला तर नाही. Rini, तुम स्टुडिओला ग्रुप में है ना? Recording का
Okay, shall we continue? So the thing is that like then press release and statements by these NGOs also, that also are kind of this one. So from that, but the problem with our journalists is that they will just report only about that press release and then they will just make it as a one column story. But from that the press release also they can like kind of do a investigative report or something else and then they can do a detailed reporting also, right? So that can also like happen. And tips from sources. So the news sources also plays a major role. Like people like this human rights organization, then human rights activists, this police officials, the government officials, like who are like who they are like interacting from them also they can take. And again another thing is this calendar. Like every year there will be this day, like UN Human Rights Day or like Women's Day or certain things. So for example, if Women's Day is there, just not that like the reporter will be like reporting it as okay, International Women's Day was like celebrated, had to be like across the country and like they were like organizing so many. It's not that one. So they can also bring in that like what kind of like gender equality is there in that like society, right? So what are the challenges that women are facing in that particular? So from any angle or from the theme of that year also, they can write a detailed like report. Okay, so that's one. And that the what are the other like human rights issues that make news is like police brutality, gender-based violence, child abuse, insecurity, and then courts are also like very important beat. Okay, but we normally like don't discuss about like the courts. Actually, the court beat I don't know about here, but in Tamil Nadu and all, it's like very considered as a very important beat. So because like court is there like where they are like seeing like so many or like court cases, right? And then like judgments, and then like a lot of these people like coming and filing like many cases and all. So you will like find like what is wrong in that particular state or in that society, right? So from that also like you can like get a lot of like inputs about like just how to report like or like what to report. Like you can get those news from there also. And election fraud and violence and refugees and internally displaced persons. In Northeast we have this one, right? So in Mizoram we have this Myanmar refugees and then like Manipur, these internally displaced persons are there. and people living with disabilities and war and conflict. So all this like issues like makes the news, right? So this one. So you can say that okay, what is the point of reporting this one? Whether this reporting has any impact, right? So recently there was one case. I think you must have like read about that one, about the caste-based segregations and caste-based works allotment in Indian prisons, right? So prison in India comes under the state, right? So each state has its like own code, this one like the code book, and from that only manual for that particular code, right? So what they do is that they were still following the colonial rules, right? So most of this, so this reporter called this Shukanya Shanta, she is with Wire, and what she did is in 2020 she started like she wrote a 5-part series of like news based on this inhuman treatment of prisoners and caste basis and how it's like operating, right? So she reported that one. The first story is about Rajasthan. So in Rajasthan, actually, one Bihari guy, he got he committed some crime or something else, and then they put him in the Rajasthan jail. And when he was like taken as a prisoner, like they asked him like what's your caste, and he said his caste, and that caste comes under the scheduled caste category in Rajasthan. So what they did is they made him like clean the toilets and everything, right? So from that, she did a kind of investigative report, and then she started with that, article, and then that this is the thing from segregation to labor. Manu's caste law governs the Indian prison system. So that was the first news like she did it, right? So she has like done a kind of and even about like Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu particularly, in Palayam prison, that the prisoners are segregated based on the caste. So if someone is Dalit, they'll be like put in a different cells, and like this OBC caste, they'll be like put in there based on their caste. Okay, so there was this one. Then she also like reported about that one, like where she reported. And then what happened? The Rajasthan news which she published, it has a huge reach, and then the High Court of Rajasthan took that news as a suo moto. That is like based on the newspaper, this wire reporting only. They took up that news, and then they said that like now the manual has to be changed because it's very colonial and it's like against the constitutional values, right? Because Indian constitution, as per Indian constitution, everyone is equal before the law, right? So they cannot be like segregated based on the caste, right? So then like there was this impact, like seeing the report, and it was like it's a very nice investigative report and it's very detailed report. And then in Rajasthan manual it got like they changed that one, but that was only one incident, and other states they didn't care about that one. So she did that one in 2020, and she waited till 2022, but she was still collecting information regarding those things and everything. So she like after like 2 years she thought that like I thought that like Rajasthan court, like all the other courts will be taking it as a suo moto, but nothing is happening. So there is not much change. So what she can do? Then what she did is like she tried to talk with her like lawyer. I think she is like Diksha Badekar or Bangla. So Maharashtrian. So she said like, okay, let's file a case. And then she was like looking for some person to be like involved with her, but no one was like ready to be like as a petitioner. So the journalist herself like became an activist, and she became the petitioner for that particular case. And then they filed it in the Supreme Court, and then for that only the judgment came that they say that it's the caste-based division of labor in prison is unconstitutional. Okay, so that one. So you can see that we are thinking that okay, there won't be any impact. Like what? Who will like read those news also, right? But there is some kind of like impact, right? So and sometimes like journalists also becoming like activists, and then they are like trying to bring out that one. So that is the thing, because like prisons or like kind of even like we communication people, like we don't have much idea about like prisons and all, right? So I met one guy whose research is about the illicit media behavior of prisoners in Lebanon. Okay, so how these prisoners in Lebanon, particularly like two jails, they were kind of smuggling these mobile phones, and then they are using that mobile phone, and then they are kind of joining in TikTok, and then they are like trying to come up with their grievances, like what's wrong in their like prison, like how, and it was also during this COVID and all, so how it was, the prisoners are like getting affected and people are dying and all those things. Okay, so his whole research is about, but I think in India, like I don't think like any of us are doing, even like library since people are doing certain research about how prisoners are being with books and the reading, it helps them in like surviving those this thing. So that is also one like important like topic on that. So here I have given this. There is also a very short film, like the interaction with the journalist. It's for 20 minutes. Maybe like after the thing, you can watch that one. So this is the quote of like, so in journalism school we are told that we are journalists, not activists, right? And that's something we try to keep as it is. We don't want to become one, but we do want our stories to have a certain kind of impact. Otherwise, how does it matter if somebody is reading and like forgetting about it, especially human rights? Prisons are not a space that get extensively covered. It's difficult because we don't have access to prisons nor the wherewithal to do such stories. So it was like this one. So, and again, the problem is that if this one though, like it's not affecting any political agenda or anything else, so she has don't have any problem, right? But there are like journalists who are like facing prosecution for reporting human rights violations. For example, there is this one reporter called Siddiq Kapan who was booked under UAPA when he was trying to go to Hathras to report a Dalit girl, like rape and murder, right? So he was like stopped, and then he has to like fight a long. Even now, like although he came out of like bail, but still he is like fighting his case. So it's a long case, right? So in India or like anywhere else, like whoever like reporting about human rights stories is also like not safe. That's what like around the world they are saying that journalism is not a crime, right? And then they are like trying to do their job, right? But the governments, they don't want them to do so. Even during this Israel-Palestine conflict, like Al Jazeera journalists, they many of them have killed. I think during this genocide, like I think more than 40 journalists have been killed. Okay, and they are targeted and then killed. I saw one girl like wearing that T-shirt with press. I asked like, "Are you from press? Why you are wearing it?" She said that I'm wearing this T-shirt in solidarity with the journalist who got like killed in this, the Israel Palestine like war. So that's a problem. So like even like they are not also safe. When we talk about like human rights, we are also talking about like how the journalist has to report about the human rights. But do the journalists have that kind of human rights? Do they have the freedom of speech and expression? I think you all know about like Indian Constitution, Article 19(1)(a). It says that there is this right to freedom of speech and expression, right? So in Indian Constitution, when Ambedkar was drafting the Constitution, he was very clear that he don't want to give like extra power to the press. So in US, we have this full freedom, right? They have this First Amendment saying that the press has the full freedom to report whatever they want to do. But in India, Ambedkar was like bit worried about the commercial and casteist nature of the media. Then he don't want to give like so much power to the media, and then he made the freedom of speech and expression to all the individuals, and that one also will be considered as the freedom of press, right? So like whatever the we are having the freedom, no, that's what the journalists are also having, right? So for them also, if they are like speaking the truth, if they are like trying to highlight the human right violations, they are also like under threat, right? And you also see this every year, this the newspaper without borders, right? They are like all the time like this releasing the reports about the press freedom like across the world. So now in Indian press is also partly free only, it's not like fully free, so there are like certain restrictions. So that's that. So here the journalist not only witness and then they are reporting, but they also have an ethical obligation, right? Because they are having access to so many privileged spaces which we common people we don't know, even though we and journalists are having the same fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression, but journalists are having like separate kind of bit, they have this access to like privileged spaces. If we want to meet a district commissioner, we won't be allowed, right? But a journalist with a press card, they can get an appointment with the district commissioner and then they can meet, right? So they have that kind of like privileges. So the journalists with that privileges, they also have an like ethical obligation to report about the human rights issues, not only the violations, right? So that one. And then when the researchers, as researchers, when we are I think you all have read about this Chomsky's and Herman's work on manufacturing consent, the political economy of the mass media in 1988, right? So this work, although like it's like got published in 1988, but it is still relevant. So for the media, like what is stopping the media from reporting these human rights issues or like violations, right? So that's the thing. Why certain issues like doesn't take the front page stories when someone's wedding becomes the talk of the year, right? Kind of pre-wedding, post-wedding, and the wedding. It's like going on and on for a year, right? 2024 was like Ambani's wedding, and then we are all like kind of forced, even when you like scroll your Instagram also, it was there, right? Even though you are not following them, right? But it was there like everywhere, all the media and like all the celebrities, like everyone is like kind of posting it, and you can't avoid, like even though you don't want to consume it, but it is being pushed, right? So that kind of this one. So why it's like happening? Like it has a thing like that's what this Chomsky is like talking about. What is stopping the media from reporting these human rights violations or like human rights journalism? What is stopping them? There are these five sources. The one five filters. The first one is the ownership. Like ownership like plays a major role, right? But we never talk about that one. Who are the owners? Like even in India, who are the owning these newspapers, right? You can see that only the very elite people, they are the owners, right? So they will be like this media owners like decide. Even in India, when you talk about this media ownership, this Reliance, this having like all this, how many like they are having like 18 or 20 channels, I guess. News 18, no? So this channel like it's under them only. So most of this, even in US also, when you talk about like ownership, only like few corporates, they are like controlling all the media like across, right? So it not only like just the print media like television, news, this one, radio, then internet, and then also like to films and their distribution, theaters, everything. So who is like controlling that one? And the second one is the advertisers. So that is very important, like to the advertisers. So for example, like I will tell you, so in a mall, okay, if worker like suicide or she is like complaining, okay, she is sending a letter to a media house, will it be considered as they will like take it up? No, because they that mall or that particular company, they may be the major advertiser for that particular newspaper or like television, and they don't want to lose their advertising revenue, they will stop. But the newspapers, the television channels particularly, like I used to talk with my friends and my like juniors who are like working in the television channels, they are also using the news as a way of control the advertisers, okay? So if they get like one negative news, and then this advertiser was not like a kind of taking care of them or like giving them like a proper advertising, what they'll do is they will like immediately run it up as a flash news, okay? And then the reporter will be like giving a very long commentary like on screen or in phono. They'll be like keep on talking about for like half an hour, and then everyone gets to know about this negative news, right? And immediately that particular advertiser will call up their owner and they'll say, okay, let's solve this one, you please take back the news. I will be like kind of giving you this much advertisement to your company, right? So this advertising thing, it's actually controlling the news. Like it's like that one. If you go and talk to these journalists, you will get to know a lot of things, like how they are also like controlling these advertisers. Okay, so that's a problem, like this money, because everyone like needs money, right? And mostly the newspapers in the northeast, they are not flourishing so much because we don't have that much like trade and commerce also, right? For particularly in Mizoram, we have like 206 newspapers on there, but like only one newspaper is like exceeding like 50,000 circulation of copies. The other newspapers are having only like 10,000, 5,000, 2,000, 3,000 only, right? Why? Because there is not like many commercial enterprises in that area, right? And then they are also only like 10 lakh people, and then the advertisers also don't have like that much stake, because they have like 10 million or 100 million other, like why they have to like just focus on like just 10 lakh people, right? So that is also one reason like why this human rights news are also not like reported in the media. And the third one is sources, right? The sources, like from whom you are like getting these sources also, like from, for example, if there is like two parties are in conflict, and then someone is like violating. For example, I said that the mall owner and that the what do you call it, the employee who works in that mall, right? And the employee considers that this mall owner is kind of exploiting her, and then they are not paying anything, and then they are not taking care of what their welfare, and her personal life and liberty is being at stake, right? But when it comes to this one, like the newspapers or the journalists, what they do is they always go with the sources from the elite classes, right? And they will like neglect the people who are in the marginalized, right? So they will never take their voices, right? So that is also one reason that why these human rights stories are not like reported like properly also, right? And again, this flag and ideology, we know that. So this is the thing. So this one you can see that during this Iraq war, like how this Gulf war, like this US media has like reported widely, and how you can see all these five filters like working like effectively. So you can see in 1983 there was this Korean airlines was shot by Soviet. Okay, then you know that how the US media will be reporting, because for them there is this Cold War was with Soviet Russia, right, at that time. So they were kind of condemning the thing, and they are like kind of saying that how they can do this inhuman thing, all those things, and like all the media were like flashing with this one, right? And again in 1973 there was this one Libyan civilian airline was shut down by Israel, but that one was not considered as a news for them. So that's the problem. Like shooting airlines is inhuman, right? And people are there, and civilians' life are under stake, right? But why certain issue is like taking like important, right? It's not that Korean airlines, the US is like worried about like Korean people. No, they are like worried only that Russia has like done it, so they have to like flash this one, because Russia is their political enemy, so they are using that one. But when it like Libya happens, for them like Israel is their friend, so they don't want to go against it. So this is the hypocrisy that kind of stopping the media from reporting fairly these human rights issues and the human rights violations, right? And then like throughout the world, it's not only in India, you can see like how much things are like happening in like Africa and like Latin America and Europe and like everywhere, right? But like only like even like this one, like Ethiopia's war on terror in Somalia in 2005, it was not considered as a news for them. But in Zimbabwe, when this Mugabe's high-handed rule was there, then everyone was like trying to report that one, right? So they always like choose which one to report, and then if and only it is kind of aligning with their ideology and it's going to benefit their ideology, then they are like reporting it. Okay, so this is the thing. So and again, when we talk about these human rights violations and everything, like why certain issues are not being like reported, is that it's a kind of distance human suffering. That's what I say. Even though human right issues are coming under the news value proximity, right? Proximity means very low, very close to us, and it's like in our vicinity, right? But here it's they are like thinking that it's like it's somewhere it's happening, so it's very distant and it doesn't going to affect us in any way. So that was the kind of this one. But if the media was like persistently like report certain issues, then it also has a value. For example, when Kosovo was attacked by Serbia, there was this huge media campaign, and media was like reporting like totally like how it was inhuman and it was dehumanizing like Kosovans and all those things, right? And there was this cry of this human rights violations. Then there was a kind of impact on it. Okay, so that's what like that's the thing. So here, the even though like Kosovo is in like this Russia, nearby Russia, but still they have considered, even though it's like very distant from them, but they didn't consider as a distant human suffering. They thought that it is like affecting all the humanity. So human rights journalism is about treating all the human beings equally, and it doesn't mean that if and only people are like killed in our like society, killed in our community, killed in our state, we have to worry about. No, like wherever there is a violations of any human beings, then we have to get into action. So that's what this human rights is like talking about the solidarity to all, like to all the humanity. So even if something happened to even a single human being, it is an attack on humanity. So that kind of idea only this human rights approach journalism is keep on talking about it. Okay. So this one also you can say that Judith Miller of this New York Times, she was like complicit in kind of coming up with this propaganda news. Like when we see this news like coverage with the angle of this propaganda model of this Herman and Chomsky, you can see that. So in that only they have like written about it. Yeah, thank you so much. So Judith Miller, so you know that why US attacked Iraq? Because they said that Saddam Hussein is having a mass destruction, weapons like chemical weapons are there. So we have to like kind of find, and then we have to save the world, right? So that was the thing like they were keep on repeating in the media, and that was the propaganda of the US media. But what happened at the end? They like invaded Iraq and everything happened, and Saddam Hussein was fine. But they couldn't like show even a single evidence of the presence of these weapons of mass destruction, right? So that's the thing. So here they are saying that Judith Miller was like going with the sources. Like one of the sources was the Iraqi dissident politician Ahmed Chalabi, right? So from him only she took all the thing, but even though she didn't quoted him, but like so if someone is, for example, there is an opposition party and then he or she is having a problem with the existing leadership, then they might have their like own ideas, right? They wanted to like kind of pass it as a news only, right? So she has like chosen that one. She didn't like go with the other sources. So that was like one of the criticism against her. Okay, so that's the thing. So one thing is that we have to accept the responsibility to report all kinds of human rights violation, whether it's being torture, killing, rape, or something else. But we have to also talk about the cultural and structural violence. Okay, so all those things like forced migration, forced labor, human trafficking, marginalization, and exclusion of minorities. All those things like we have to talk about that one. So Galtung, I think you have like this human rights journalism also has a close kind of link with this peace journalism, right? So peace journalism, like John Kaltung also talking about an ABC conflict triangle. So he is talking about like behavior, attitude, and contradictions. So behavior or the visible violence. So if someone is attacked, like hit, like beat, like stabbed, that one you can see. But there are like attitude, like there is a kind of why someone is beating someone or why someone is killing someone. No, there is a kind of underlying motive behind that one. So it might be having a kind of religious justification or kind of culturally like I am like we are like superior to them and they are inferior to us, right? All those like this kind of structural violence, that is the cultural violence, also plays a major role in this one. Okay, and then the contradictions like so how these military occupations, slavery, apartheid, and colonialism. So that's it. So for example, if a woman is being hit, right? So we will the reporters will be just only reporting that one as that okay, it's a kind of a domestic violence case was filed against this man for like hitting his wife, right? And then they will just only one column story, and then they will like stop reporting about that one, right? That is that because there was this behavior, it was very visible, so we are like only reporting about that one. But why that thing happened is that the kind of patriarchy that is there, and then the structurally like it was like inequality, like how men are being like treated in a particular society, right? All those things are there, but the media will never go in depth. They will just talk about only the behavior, like, and then they'll just report as it is, but they will never discuss in detail about like patriarchy or like other things, okay, or like cultural things are also like there, but they won't like talk about that one. So that's what like lot of this human rights violations like still existing, because the media is not like questioning the things like very critically and the structural level. They are just kind of reporting only, so their duty like ends with just reporting, and they are not like kind of analyzing the whole thing, like why it happened and why it should stop. There is no such like deeper explanation, okay. So that's the thing. And then he is talking about like how in societies with conflict, and he is also talking about like the violence, like it doesn't happen like suddenly. There are like certain situations that are like things which are like supporting like that perpetrator to let him like have the courage to do that kind of violation, right? So the problem is that we are only talking about like when the victim comes out and like complain, but we are not talking about why certain people are like engaging in certain violent activities and what is making them to do engage in those kind of like violent activities. We are not discussing in detail. So that's what this Galton is talking about. So that's what it's about, like preventive. So how we can like prevent this one even before it get like reported. Like even the media shouldn't wait for that a man to like beat a woman, but even before they have to like keep on like report about that one, how gender equality, it's it's very important. Gender parity should be there, and there should not be like any discrimination. Women should also have the right to live life and like everything, right? But we are not discussing, because when you go and see the representation of women in the media, you can see that how they are like how it's like very skewed, and then very what you call very commercial also, like why they are like how they are like representing women also. So all these things are like kind of connected, right? Because they are not talking about the larger problem in the society, the larger social structure or the cultural structure, but they are just only like reporting like if something happened, right? So that's what. So media is also kind of incomplicit with this structural violence, okay. So that's a whole thing. Then so, like, how this sustainable positive peace can be achieved is by ensuring justice for all. Because since injustice leads to structural violence, right, in the form of poverty, famine, or forced migration, right? So that's the thing. So what he is saying is that for a completely like peaceful society, all these forms of violence must be eliminated, right? How it can be eliminated if and only we kind of try to eliminate the inequality in the society, then only we can like prevent those violences, right? So that's the thing. So that's what he is talking about it. So again, when we talk about these human rights, there are like three sets of rights, right? The first one is the first generation rights, that is the civil and political rights, only about like right to vote and like this one. And the second generation rights, or this positive economic, social, and cultural rights, right? And then the third generation rights are like this what you call like both of this civil political rights and also economic, social, and cultural rights. It all comes under the third generation rights. So here you can see that the civil rights include the right to life, personal liberty, security and integrity, privacy, fair trial, and the right to marry. So even in India, do all have the right to marry? You can see there are like lots of these issues of this uh, what you call honor killings. Have you heard about that one? Honor killings, right? Tamil Nadu is also one of the state which is like affected by this honor killings, and Punjab, Haryana, and everywhere, right? So the women doesn't have the right to choose their partner to marry, even though it is enshrined in the this one what you call human rights and also like in the constitution, but still they don't have the right. right? Why they are not allowed to marry whom they want to do it? Because there is a caste system is there, and also caste patriarchy is also like functioning, right? So if until unless and again the whole endogamy is the essence of this caste system, right? So if and only you marry within your own caste, that caste system like goes on, right? So that is the main major, like element of this caste system to thrive. So that's what they oppose if someone like try to resist that one and to come out of that endogamy, right? Then it becomes a huge issue for that particular family or something else, right? So that's what they are calling it as like honor killings. But in Tamil Nadu, they call it like dishonor killings. Like what kind of honor is that they are keeping in the wombs of women? Like why they have to control like women? No, so they are like kind of focusing on that one. And then when we talk about this political, this economic the political rights and the freedom to right to vote and the right to participate in the conduct of public affairs and the right to freedom of speech and expression, assembly and association, that all comes under this first generation rights. Okay, and I think even recently you have seen the Samsung workers in Chennai. They were like protesting. They were on a, I think, more than 2 or 3 weeks of strike for letting them to make an association. Okay, they want to form an workers association, but the Samsung company was not letting them to form the association. So they were on a month long, protest, and then at last they have like won that one also, because that is also considered as one of the if and only they have an association, then they can fight for their rights, right? Then collectively, so that's what they want that one. So for that, so it also comes under this first generation rights. And the second generation rights, the economic rights, the right to work, the right to just safe and healthy working conditions, the right to form and join trade unions, and the right to strike also. And then the social rights coming under this right to health, social security, and even like including food, clothing and housing. And the cultural rights such as the right to education, to participation in cultural life and to self-determination, this all comes under this. Okay, so when we talk about like human rights journalism, the journalism has to focus on this civil rights, political rights, economic, social and cultural rights, right? So we have to be like aware of those things, then only we can. There is actually a beautiful paper from West Papua Guinea. I think you all know like Papua Guinea is part of this Indonesia, and they were kind of resisting the what you call the discrimination by this Indonesian government, and how they are trying to control their thing. So there, the journalists in this Papua Guinea, they were keep on reporting about this human rights violations in their like region, right? But for that, the journalists are like well aware about their human rights and what it's like allowed in this UNDHR, this United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, right? And if and only the journalists are well aware about that human rights, then they can like report about that also, right? So that is the thing. So again, the another one thing is the underlying principle of human right is universality. Everyone is entitled to protection of life and freedom from abuse, regardless of ethnic origin, religion, or gender. And then, as I said, that free speech and human rights, like even the journalist also should have the freedom of speech and expression, so that they can also like actively contribute to the democracy, right? And that the all parties should like allow the journalists to work freely in conflict zones also, right? I think you all know Rana Ayub, right? Even she has like written on her Instagram yesterday that when she came to Manipur, when she tried to do the reporting, she was like kind of stopped everywhere, and like every time people were like following her, the police and like army and everyone, and they are not letting her to collect this one. So when we talk about like freedom of express, it's also about the freedom to collect news, right? And then to write it and then to publish it, right? And then to disseminate it also. But here, like there are like certain situations where the journalists are being, continuously like repressed, and then their freedom of speech and then their freedom of movement is also like restricted, right? So sometimes like I like actually my whole research is about how this Dalit issues are being represented in the media. So in Tamil Nadu, there was this one incident happened that Dalit group, they were like celebrating their social leaders like birthday, and there were like huge number of people were like participating in that thing, and there was this violence happened, and then there was this conflict between this the followers and then the police, and then there was this shooting was there, and then people got killed. Okay, but when the journalists they wanted to go to the spot, the police is sealing the thing and they are not letting them to go inside. And they said that we will give you the press release and then we will give you the information. You report from that one. But if the journalist is not allowed to go to the spot and then to talk to the people there, and how they can report it properly, right? Because if they are getting the press release from the police and the FIR report from the police, it is from their own perspective, right? And we don't get the other perspective of the people like who got killed or their families, and then the other people are the people who they they witness the thing, right? So those things like the journalists are also restricted not to go there. So how they can report it properly? So this is also one reason when something happened, the journalist. It's not that we are all the time blaming the journalist, right? You guys are not doing your work properly. You are very commercialized, all those things. But there are also the environment is also not conducive for them to go freely and then to report it, right? So that is also one reason. And then this Galtung has proposed and coined the peace journalism as an alternative, and it's also kind of very much relevant or similar to this human rights journalism only. So a journalism that is not only about reporting the facts, right, but also asking questions about these reasons for these acts, like why it happened, so how it can be prevented or managed with the minimum suffering of from the people. So that's what like they have conceptualized as human rights journalism, and journalism with a human face. A journalism that cares for the people, one that prioritizes them over capitalism and above all over the whims and caprices of political demagogues, right? So you can see that how the journalists can use their much privileged access to news media sources and their professional ability to communicate, not only to report events as they happen, but also to deconstruct the news and add in more depth. Okay, so that is the. So when we talk about this journalism with a human touch, so how if, like nowadays whenever we are seeing any news, we are feeling numbness, right? Even when we say that okay, this many people got killed in this war, this many people are like affected, this many people are in this, this camps and all, but we are never affected by that one because too much of these things are also coming because we are all seeing those people in numbers. That's what like the people nowadays they are saying that I am not a number. I think Virginia Kalka also write one like poem on that one, like I am not a number, right? I cannot be reduced to numbers. I have a life. I have my story. Like I have a history. I have a like culture. So you cannot just kind of make me as a number, right? Restrict me as a number. So that's what like human rights journalism is also talking about journalism with human touch. So how it can also like effectively like resist this compassion fatigue, right? And then like it also let us have some kind of empathy. So whoever reads that news, they will feel empathy. So recently there was this one what you call a cyclone was there, and Mizoram was like badly affected, and then one family like deeply affected. Okay, all the family members they died in that landslide. Okay, and then this Kimi Colony Forest Mojo, she reported that story. So what she did is like all the members like in the family like 5 or 6 like killed in that one. So like she started like speaking about like each and every one, like how like one is like very much interested in reading and how she always like collected books likewise. Okay, so she like gone behind that story, like not just report about 6 people got killed and then this was this worst landslide in Mizoram like after this many years, all those things, but she also gone in depth that talking about their stories. Okay, so that's what like the right when we talk about like journalism, like we have to go with that human touch. We have to show the readers that there is a human being and they also had like lot of dreams and aspiration everything, but they got killed, right? So that thing only we have to like come out of that one, okay? And then like again there is this huge discussion about whether to be objective or not, right? So but nowadays there is thing like from wherever actually like most of my talk was based on this one book by Selvanathan on human rights journalism, and he has like written based on this genocide that happened in Sri Lanka. You all know the civil war that happened in 2010, right? So he has like based most of his work based on that one. So what he's saying is that it doesn't mean to be like you have to be like objective. What happened is that when the reporters are like only reporting as subjective, okay, they'll go and then they will talk to both sides and then they will just report it. So some conflict happened. So police force says this and this people are saying this one and this one. So we are just only like establishing the we reporting the facts, but we are not going in depth because we wanted to be like very objective. That I don't have any connection with this story, like whatever happened, I just go as a professional. I saw and then I talked to people and then I got the facts and then I have reported it. But this kind of reporting, it's not going to solve like any violence or it's not going to stop any violence, right? And it's also like not a way for this peace journalism also, or like it's not even like human rights approach also, right? So that's what. So the journalist has a clear value of humanitarianism, truth, and then like holism also, right? And they have to be like proactive. They should not be like reacting to that incident, but they have to kind of proactive, right? So their orientation has to be on the peace rather than war, on truth rather than propaganda, on people rather than elite, on solution and transformation rather than victory. So that should be the focus. So when we talk about like human rights journalism, it must be informed by the values of human rights with the cosmopolitan context of global justice and not by the manipulation of political or economic interest, right? So here the journalist mission is to inform without reservation. Okay, they shouldn't self-censor. Like most of the times, what happen is that the journalist or like self-censoring. They were like, if I report this one, I may be kind of disturbed or my family will be like affected or people may not like this one or like later on the government sources may not give me news, right? So in that way they are kind of like doing a self censorship, okay? So that kind of self censorship also it's very harmful, right? Because the journalists they know the reality, the truth, and if they are not reporting about that one and how the whole world will know about that one, right? So the journalism with a human touch means writing about people behind the story and the story behind the people. So that is very much important. I think there was this one video was very viral during this Lebanon attack. One small Lebanese girl who was with her hairdresser, and then the hairdresser was like trying to cut her hair. I think you must have like seen, or if you don't see, go and check it out. That one. So it was very nice, like how the kid was like trying to be like she was like very afraid to have a haircut, but the hairdresser was very funny and he is making her like laugh, and then he is like transforming her into a with a new haircut. Okay, so that was very they are saying that like there were like so many people died, and that girl was also died in that particular like attack, right? So they are like trying to bring out this girl and then the hairdresser also, like how they were like human beings and how they were also with like flesh and blood, right? And they were there still yesterday and today they were not there. So how much they have this dreams and aspirations were there and everything has gone because of this like what, so it has to be like stopped. So that's the thing. So if something happened, it doesn't mean that you have to just report this many people died, but the journalist has to bring about like what is the story behind who has died, right? And like behind that story also, that is very important. And we that's what like when we talk about like certain things, we are saying that they are like dehumanizing the people, right? They're dehumanizing the people who the victims, right? So dehumanizing is that we are restricting them into numbers and we are not seeing them as a human being. We are just seeing as a kind of statistics, right? So that one we have to come out of that one. So we have a concern for human dignity, right? So for the journalism to be human right based, it must be based on the holistic human rights approach, informed by first generation right, that is the civil and political, and the second generation right, economic, social and cultural, and both inspired by the covenants of twin 1966 United Nations Charter. So that has to be there. And again, when we talk about this one, it has to be preventive rather than reactive, right? And then, because most of the time we are only was worried about the first generation rights, but the second generation right, that is the economic, social and cultural rights. We are not talking about the migrant workers or the construction workers, right? Or the education also. We are like not taking much, because education alone, if and only there is a school result or something else, higher secondary result, then there will be like more space for that one. Otherwise, we are not talking about like how the schools are functioning and all, right? So all those things. And then, so it is better to prevent the escalation of violence than to try to stop it, right? So that is one thing. And then another one thing is that this one, like Amartya Sen has talked about that one. So in India, like many famines have been stopped only because of a free and fair media, because they were like keep on reporting about that one, right? So that's what, like the country has like avoided like major famines. So when we talk about this human rights journalism, it's also kind of like diagnostic style of like, it's already 1 hour.
We can take a break also.
Okay, like I'll finish it only 1 or 2 slides. I'll finish this one now. It's about to be like over. So so here you see that human rights journalist cannot just choose the news story. He must choose a news source in accordance with the direction of the news to be written, and he must reject news sources that mislead the audience understanding of human rights violations. Right. So that is also like, even though he is forced to choose a source of news that is credible but misleading, he must have the courage to include sources that can provide a true picture of reality. This will often happen, okay, because in India, whenever certain crime or like this thing happen, no, they will always go with the police first information report, right? So whenever they are going with the first information report, sometimes it's all with the bias of this system also, right? So if they are forced to do it, the journalists, they have to like report from the first information report. So most of the time they are also like not inclusive of the other news sources. So what they can do is, it's okay, you better go with the FIR, but again you also talk to the other news sources, like the people who are there and who are affected and who are having a different view about that one, a human rights activist or like someone else. You can bring in those and then try to put forward their views also. You have to be inclusive of that one. Then only like you can give a holistic view about that particular news. Okay, and then they also need to respect the information the audience has. So the journalists, sometimes they no need to be like very creative, they no need to like add anything, but if they go to the field and then if they like try to talk to the people and then get the information itself, it's more than enough to report these human rights violations. Okay, and then it's again like it has to be like solution rather than the victory oriented, truth rather than propaganda, people rather than elite, and win-win rather than win-lose, this one. Okay, so when we talk about this objectivity and impartiality, right? So many people, many journalists, they are talking about it's a lazy journalism. When you say like objectivity, right? So you cannot be like very objective, because we are all human beings and you are also dealing a human being issue. So whenever like there are like conflict with two sides or like any issue like happen, you have to like kind of try to bring out the truth, right, instead of trying to be like impartial and objective. Okay, so that's what like again and again they are saying. So because why they are saying is that, even like the journalists are also like kind of making decisions, right? Because whom to take the bites and like what to write and what not to write. So they are also making a kind of decisions. So they cannot be objective, right? So we are all human beings and we are all with our like own bias and prejudice and everything. And there are also certain bias that comes up with our social and cultural upbringing, right? And so many other things are there. So anyway, even though you say it's objective reporting, it's not objective in any way, because it's all like kind of influenced by so many other factors like socializing factors and all. So that's what like a journalist cannot be like truly objective, right? So that's what like anyway they can't be like objective, so they have to be like go with the truth, they have to side with the truth, they have to like try to see who is being affected the most, and you have to stand with them. So that was their stand. Okay, so objectivity is a search for the truth, it's a process. So search for objectivity will make us search for truth. I think this is the end. So any questions? Any questions from the first row? You guys were listening, at least trying to listen. Any questions? No, no. But anyway, it makes sense, right? You can link the human rights approach with the peace journalism, and then about like objectivity and about like the role of the journalist. So that's what like we are like keep on discussing further. But anyway, I'll try to share the materials also. You can go and like read, and then like you will get like more understanding about this one. And I will also share the link for that the 20 minutes like a long kind of documentary by this about that lady, the journalist who reported that caste-based segregations in the prison, and how it was like become a law now, right? So that one, like I will like share it. You can like watch that. It was a very interesting like documentary. Okay, yeah. Thank you.